This is module number 20, and I'm going to talk to you about the beginnings of Indian literature in English. English language reached India with the colonizers or the East India Company. That was in the 1600s. And when English education started, the people were divided into Orientalists and Anglicists. Some people wanted only Oriental education. Some people supported English education. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was an Anglicist, whereas our Rabindranath Tagore's father, Rabindranath Tagore, was an Orientalist. Eventually, a Renaissance dawned in India, and a lot of writers and thinkers emerged in particularly West Bengal and Maharashtra, also in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, etc., who supported learning and forward thinking. People like Keshub Chandra Sen, Dayananda Saraswati, Ram Balakrishna Jayakar, Dr. Atmaram Pandurang, etc. And the Renaissance in India led to a lot of education as well as literary writing. The first work to be written in English was Travels of Deen Muhammad. The first work by an Indian to be written in English was Travels of Deen Muhammad, written by Sake Deen Muhammad. He wrote about, conquerors of India such as Genghis Khan, Timur, Babur, etc., described various important cities of India. That is a kind of book the Travels of Deen Muhammad is. The first published English novel was published in 1935. It was first serialized in 1864 itself. That is why it is the first English novel, but in book form it was published only much later. That was Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's Rajmohan's Wife. Rajmohan's Wife is a novel based on nationalist feelings, and Matangini, the protagonist, is a powerful creation of an 18-year-old young woman. Rajmohan's Wife by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee was his only English novel. After that, he wrote a lot of Bengali novels like Durgesha Nandini, Anand Mad, etc. The earliest verse play in English was The First Parsi Baronet by C.S. Nazir. The first Indian poet in English was Henry Derozio. Henry Derozio was born in Calcutta, and he was inspired by Byron. There was a Byronic melancholy in his writings also. His important poems are The Harp of India, The Fakir of Jangira, etc. In The Heart of India, it's a patriotic poem. He is lamenting the decline in Indian poetry. The Fakir of Jangira is a story of Nulini, Brahmin widow who is going to perform sati, and her lover, the fakir, carries her away and saves her. Finally, they both die. Michael Madhusudan Dutt was a pioneering Bengali writer as well as an English writer. He has written translations from Bengali of Mekhanad Badhakavya, Tilotama, etc. The Captive Lady by Michael Madhusudan Dutt is a famous poem. It's a narrative poem. Kashi Prasad Ghosh was another Bengali writer. So was Ramesh Chandra Dutt. Ramesh Chandra Dutt was the cousin of Toru Dutt and Aru Dutt. He has written poetry in English, and he has translated Ramayana and Mahabharata in Tennyson's Locksley Hall meter. He has also written 4 historical novels. Manmohan Ghosh was the brother of Sri Aurobindo, and his poems were published along with English writers' poems in England. That was a great honor. And then came Toru Dutt. She lived partly in Europe, in France, and she has written a collection of translations from like 70 French poets. That book is called A Sheaf Gleaned in French Fields. She has written one novel in English and one in French. The English novel is called Bianca, or The Young Spanish Maiden. Our Casuarina Tree, Lakshman, The Lotus, these are famous poems by Toru Dutt. Rabindranath Tagore wrote Gitanjali. Gitanjali was published in Marathi with 157 poems, 157, and in English with 103 poems. The publication of Gitanjali was by Macmillan. And Gitanjali uses the conventions of love poetry to depict man's relationship with God. Tagore has written a lot of short stories, novels, plays also, and poems. And Wreck or Naukha Dubi is a famous novel, so is Gora. Many of these novels have nationalist feelings and existentialist situations, choice, right and wrong, morality. These are all themes in his novels. Khare Bhaire or The Home and the World. Tagore has written poems like The Gardener, The Crescent Moon, Fruit Gathering. One thing you should remember, most of his works were written in Bengali. Almost nothing was written in English, next to nothing, because his father was against English education, remember. And other works such as Sannyasi, The Post Office, Muktadhara are all very famous. Sri Aurobindo was not only a writer, he was an editor of journals and a freedom fighter, a philosopher, spiritual reformer. And he edited a number of periodicals and newspapers. He was even involved with some violent Naxalite kind of rebellion against the British government. And he wrote The Life Divine, a treatise on metaphysics. It's a very important philosophical work by Aurobindo. Aurobindo's Savitri was written over a period of 50 years. It is an epic poem in blank verse. Savitri, subtitled The Legend or A Legend and a Symbol. It is the mythical story of Savitri bringing back the spirit of her husband Satyavan, who died. This is not just the story that is told in this epic. It is a magnificent poem dealing with the origin of man, birth of the universe, birth of the gods. And he talks about all this from the religious angle, the metaphysical angle, mythological angle, scientific angle, philosophical angle. What a magnificent poem. Aurobindo's theories of poetry are contained in the book The Future Poetry, where he talks about poetry that becomes like a mantra, like an imagist poem, mantra, very crisp and concise without description. He calls this overhead poetry. Aurobindo's plays like Perseus the Deliverer, Vasavadatta, Rodoguna, these are set in different countries, different regions, different mythologies. Worldwide setting. Two important writers of this independence period or the pre-independence period are Mahatma Gandhi or Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. As you know, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi wrote the autobiography, The Story of My Experiments with Truth. That was originally published in Gujarati in serial form in the weekly Navjeevan, and the book was serialized in English in Young India. Mahadev Desai translated it from Gujarati. Hind Swaraj or Indian Home Rule, another important work. He has also written a lot of poetry, and he was an editor of major newspapers like Young India, Harijan, Harijan Bandhu, etc. Jawaharlal Nehru wrote many of his great works from prison. Glimpses of World History, an autobiography, The Discovery of India, Letters from a Father to His Daughter. These are important. Dr. S. Radhakrishnan was not only India's first vice president, he was also a philosopher. Dr. S. Radhakrishnan has written the two-part textbook Indian Philosophy, and he has also written Kalki or The Future of Civilization, and he has made translations of the Bhagavad Gita. The translators of Bhagavad Gita, the translators of Ramayana and Mahabharata, etc., they might ask in the exam. Important people who translated Bhagavad Gita are Charles Wilkins, Edwin Arnold, C. Rajagopalachari, S. Radhakrishnan, etc. Neerad C. Chowdhury was a controversial writer of this time. Why controversial? Because he supported the British Empire in some ways. The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian has a very controversial dedication to the memory of the British Empire in India. He has also written a passage to England praising the English culture and their discipline. He got into serious trouble for supporting the British. He lost his job and he was hounded out of government service, and he had a very tough time. He became poor because of this writing. The Continent of Circe, The Intellectual in India, To Live or Not to Live. The sequel of The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian is Thy Hand, Great Anarch, title drawn from Alexander Pope. All these are important works by Neerad C. Chowdhury. You should know many of these works in detail. Another pre-independence poet was Sarojini Naidu. She was a Bengali, but she married an Andhra man and lived in Hyderabad, and she was known as the Nightingale of India. She wrote very simple village poems mostly, and also poems of devotion. Her first anthology was The Golden Threshold, and she has written famous poems like The Palanquin Bearers, Coromandel Fishers, The Parda Nashin, Indian Weavers, all rustic poems, and Bird Sanctuary, The Queen's Rival, etc. Then there are writers like K.M. Munshi, A.S.P. Iyer, T.P. Kailasam, P.A. Krishnaswamy, J.M. Lobo Prabhu. Did you take down these names? There are also British writers of the empire as well as Indian writers. There are more Indian writers. There is A. Madhavaya, who wrote Thillai Govindan. A. Madhavaya's Thillai Govindan is famous. He also wrote Satyanand and Clarinda. Then T. Ramakrishna Pillai wrote Padmini. Raj Lakshmi Devi wrote The Hindu Wife or The Enchanted Fruit. They will mostly expect you to know these titles. Be familiar with the titles. Then there is Krupabai Satyanathan. Krupabai Satyanathan is the author of Kamala, a story of Hindu life, and Saguna, a story of native Christian life. Sevanti Bai M. Nikambe is the author of Ratan Bai, a sketch of a Bombay high caste Hindu young wife. Sevanti Bai M. Nikambe wrote Ratan Bai, a sketch of a Bombay high caste Hindu young wife. Very, very, very famous are K.S. Venkataramanis, Murugan the Tiller, and Kandan the Patriot. Then I was going to tell you there are also British writers of the empire, such as Rudyard Kipling, Jim Corbett, E.M. Foster, Edward Thompson. It looks like the pre-independence writing in English, Indian writing in English was a magnificent period. So many writers and works. Please do your own research on these writers, a little more reading, collect your material and enjoy it. Thank you very much.